Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, you owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.virtualracingschool.com and learn why the best use VRS.
The S1 Racing Series is back again for what could be a championship crowning evening. We come to you from the land of pretzels, beer, and one of the most renowned circuits in all of global motorsports. Welcome to the Nurburgring, and welcome to Apex Racing TV's coverage of the S1 Racing GT3 Sprint Series. I'm your host, Ron Mullins, joined by my partner in crime, Taylor Stallworthy, with Jonathan Graborski in the virtual production hauler. I promised myself that I would say that pronunciation properly, and I mess it up. Sorry, Jonathan. And I'm blanking on it again. All right, well, we'll just move on now. We're racing at a less famous track at this beautiful facility, the Grand Prix layout, or the Südschleife, German for South Loop. It's a circuit that has a somewhat short history compared to the monster of the Nordschleife, just to the north of it, obviously, only opening in 1985, with the layout we're using today being completed back in 2002. It's still a fascinatingly challenging circuit, but also a bit of a steep departure from the other tracks we've raced on this year. We've ran at tracks like Road Atlanta, Road America, and even Bathurst as well, but this track is a little bit different from the other ones we've raced at. It's a bit more tight, technical, and challenging. It's definitely a twisting circuit all around, with really no disproportionately long straights on it either. It's very short track-esque with how twisty it is and how stop-starty it is for these GT3 cars. So I'll ask you this quick question here, Taylor. With the way this circuit is, do you think we'll see these drivers break their elbows out a little bit and start roughing each other up, or do you think they'll try and race each other clean tonight?
I think it probably depends more about where a driver is in the field when you get to that point of the race. Some drivers, if they're really trying to get aggressive and get into a fight with a championship rival, yeah, they'll definitely get the elbows out and be aggressive. But other than that, there will probably be a mix. Someone like Gregory Hovesen, who looks set as another pole position on his season, he probably won't be keen to really get too aggressive. He just wants to finish the race, put a lock on the championship, and take home the crown. But drivers like Barrera, Bellinger, Domark, and Hall, who are very close to championship rivals in terms of points, expect them to get a little more racy, whether it's on the attack or defense, because every point will count for them.
Now, you mentioned the championship fight there, and it's not really a fight, certainly for Gregory Hovesen, who's currently at your provisional pole position right now. Hasn't really been a fight for him all season throughout the 3 races so far this year. He's won all of them, and right now he is sitting at the top of the championship standings at 140 points, 45 points ahead of Olivier Bellinger and Justin Dive Bomber Barrera that are tied right now for P2. With the way the series is, the maximum points you can get out of a race is 35 points, so he's really in a good position to lock up the championship fight. Chances are he'll probably lock it up with a top 10 finish, so I think we won't call it yet, but don't be too shocked if Gregory Hoveson takes the championship win for this Season 2 of the S1 Racing Series here tonight. So right now we are wrapping up qualifying. It's a fairly shorter field compared to what we've seen so far this season. That's Hoveson right now up at the top. Very commanding performance from him. You can see a massive gap between him and Olsen in P2. Hoveson sitting at a 155.9 while Olsen's at 156.6. So that's a massive gap there, definitely the biggest all throughout this field, but we still have some of these drivers setting their final qualifying laps. Kyle Domark, who we're riding on board with now, about to head into the final chicane here at this track. Domark has had an up and down season. He was really the only person that could contend with Hoveson a few weeks ago, but then things kind of fell apart 2 weeks ago, so we'll see if he can possibly recover. He'll be starting this race from the 4th position. So qualifying has now wrapped up. We'll get the starting position here soon. It's a fairly shorter grid than we've seen throughout the rest of the season, but I think with the shorter grid, I don't think we're going to be short of racing action at all. So we're going to take a look at your starting grid now as Gregory Hoveson taking a commanding pole position, 0.7 of a second ahead of Jesse Olsen in P2. Then we have Jake Luther and Kyle Domark rounding out your second row. That's Justin Hall and Spencer Retzma completing your third row. Then Simon Atwell, series founder. I was joking with him earlier, hoping that he doesn't get hit by a falling anvil this evening. Fingers crossed I didn't just pull off a commentator's jinx on him. He lines up this race in P7. Then we have Sharif Gristle in P8. Justin Divebomber Barrera with a disappointing qualifying performance. He is in P9 with Matthew Pern rounding out your top 10. Then looking through the rest of the field, we have Bradley Alvis in P11, Christopher Castano in P12, and then our final few starters are Panalotis Adelotis in P13, Jed Pascal in 14th, and then Eric Letsky rounding out your field in P15. Not saying a qualifying time, so we'll see if he's just trying to save up his stuff here for this race. So fairly shorter grid here, only 15 drivers, but I think will be no short of racing action. What do you expect to see from this race here, Taylor?
You know, Ron, I think it's going to be a lot of what we're seeing the same. I mean, we're talking about a couple commentators' curses. Hopefully that Simon can have some good luck. But someone who doesn't need any good luck from us seems to be Gregory Hoveson, because of just how strong he has been throughout the season. The only driver to hit a 155 qualifying time, with a few of the others in 156. But one thing I've noticed, at least for this race, there is a bit more of a spread across the field. As Hoveson now finally spawns in, I think he was the last driver to get onto the grid, but I've noticed that they're not as close from some of the other time periods of 4th to 5th to 6th. So it could mean we see a little bit more separated pack racing and could lead to a little more, I don't know, a little bit quieter action, but at the same time, expect a lot of fire as the championship battle heats up. My eye's definitely going to be on Kyle Domark. And while he struggled in his challenges against Hoveson, he's been the second fastest driver. And the only reason he's not second in the standings is because he missed race 1. We'll see if he can gain some time on Barrera and Bellinger this time around. Notably, Bellinger isn't in the field.
Bellinger, for some reason, not showing up. We were expecting some departures with some drivers having other obligations to attend to, but no matter. The drivers are rounding their way over the final corner. It's possibly a championship decider night here for the S1 Racing GT3 Sprint Series. We're at round 5 of the season. I can hardly believe it myself. We have 2 races to go. The green flag is out for the penultimate round of the season. It's Gregory Hoveson taking a commanding lead very early on, pulling away pretty quickly, but it's a very difficult run here coming into turn 1. He had that slight bend in the road before these drivers go hard on that brakes and try and slow down these 1.5-ton GT3 machines and try and go through that very tight and twisty turn 1 here. So a lot of drivers making it clean so far. It's Hoveson taking a good lead right now, but it's definitely not over yet. Meanwhile, we have some action farther behind between Retzma and Luther. They're shuffling for position. Meanwhile, Domark is still close to Gregory Hoveson right now, only about 0.4 of a second separating those 2 drivers at this stage. So right now, a very clean start overall. Olsen did not take the start. He is currently in the pits. Not sure what happened there. We believe he did not take the start or might have been involved in an incident that we did not see. I believe he just decided not to take the grid, so not sure what happened there. But meanwhile, we've got a battle here with Pern, who I believe goes into the gravel trap, exiting that corner there. Yes, he does. You can see him dropping like a rock down the running order. He was going side by side with the driver there, and sadly for him, outside overtakes at this track, which is not the most forgiving in the world, still old school with not a whole lot of asphalt runoff to speak of all round. Oh, speaking of runoff, there's a driver off. That's Admiral. Oh no, the commentator's jinx strikes again. He has a mistake coming out of the hairpin at the far end of the circuit. That is coming through turn 8 here at this Nurburgring Grand Prix track. He spun there, and we might get a replay to see what happened there, but a very tricky corner to make a mistake on, trying to get the throttle applied on these GT3 cars. So a very costly mistake from him. He's right now 16 seconds behind the grid, so about 8 seconds behind the next slowest car. We're going to get a replay here soon to see what happened here. Thank you very much, Jonathan. We're going to look to see what happened here with Simon. We're following him in the Ferrari. These Ferraris have been fairly difficult for these drivers to handle, and it might be another case of that again. Yes, on the curb, and just gets a bit too squirrely and spins right ahead of Justin Barrera right behind him. And it's the curbs biting these Ferraris yet again. We've seen it all of this season, how these Ferraris are really reactive, overly reactive, you could say, to the curbs. Meanwhile, we've got Domark falling well far behind. He must have picked up a slowdown, as he is dropping down the order quite badly. He is falling like a rock. So I believe he must have picked up a slowdown. He's finally picked up the pace. But Domark, having a very bad start, who was running in P2, has now dropped down to P7. That is disaster for Domark.
It certainly is. I mean, he was up even earlier to second, but yeah, this issue means he's going to have to fight his way further up the field. And it's good news for Barrera. With a solid finish tonight, that could put him one step closer to trying to secure second in the championship, because while at the moment, Ovesen is likely going to take the title away. And as we take a look, there's a bit of action in the back. Cassano down the inside of Italiotis. They are side by side entering this new section of Mercedes and Ferrari, going at it. In the late 2010s, that was the battle you'd see in F1, Hamilton and Sebastian Vettel, but instead it's two different drivers going side by side. It's the Mercedes. Italiotis winning it out for the moment, but expect that battle for 11th to stay heated, as up ahead there's also a battle between Piran and Lightscape for 9th and 10th. So a couple packs breaking away a little bit, and now breaking to the inside and making the move is Piran. That's a good overtake into that corner, as he will now get a little bit of breathing space as they go down the next straight and try to wrap up this next lap early on. But already some exciting action. We've seen a couple of spins, and taking a look, the leaders, Tovesen is a comfortable gap, but it's not a large one. The other drivers are still there, and maybe Retsma is hoping to gain a little bit of ground. He's right on the rear of Justin Hall. Here they go down the start-finish straight. The question will be whether he can get a little slipstream advantage or not, and notably, Hovesen might have had a bit of an error. He was a full second slower than Luther last time around, who's also really close.
Yeah, Hovesen making a very uncharacteristic mistake. You can see how close it is between those two drivers as they go through the stadium section here at the opening part of this lap. So I'm not sure what happened there with Gregory Hovesen. Must have had some kind of offer. Maybe he picked up a slowdown going through that chicane. It's probably what happened to Domark, which is the reason why he dropped back down the order like a rock. It's a very tricky corner and very easy one to make a mistake on with how tight that section of the circuit is. It's really a pain in the butt chicane to deal with in any car, whether you're running in like an F3 or an F4 car or running in a GT3 or a GT4 car. It's a very easy corner to make some kind of mistake on. Now with the iRacing track limit rules here, it is real tough. So now we're seeing Luther. Ooh, that is very tight there as they go into the hairpin there. Luther is looking to try and challenge for the lead here with Gregory Hovesen. It's the only challenge that we've seen of Hovesen's dominance in the series so far. He's won every race so far, but it looks like this field is trying to conspire against him to stop that clean sweep of the races here in Season 2. So Luther went for a very... He didn't really go for it, but he definitely looked down the inside going into turn 8. That was a very overly opportunistic move, but I think if he broke out his elbows and risked damaging that front end of the Ferrari, he might have been able to get it done. But right now, that has actually cost him a little bit. He's dropped back a little bit and is now at risk of losing a position to Hall. You can see these drivers, you can cover all 4 of them with a blanket right now. We're about 5.5 minutes, nearly 6 minutes into this race, and it's Hoferson at the front as we usually expect, but the gaps are very far down, about a half a second separating him and Luther farther behind, and we have Hall and Retsma battling farther behind. You might see this battle start to heat up a little bit, 2 different cars. The BMW, which is surprisingly quick in a straight line despite it being a massive race car, and the Ferrari, which has been fast so far this season, but it's also been very edgy. And with a track like this, which has fairly high curbs, we saw it play havoc to Simon Admiral's race. That could be something that plays a role in this battle, but right now these drivers are very close and actually starting to break away a little bit from Luther and Hoferson up ahead. We've got 2 nice battles here up towards the front, and I think these will be the battles that we have to keep our eyes on, as well as the battle behind with Domark and Barrera, and another battle back here. Actually, that's up towards the front. Yeah, here's the battle with Barrera and Domark. They're still fairly close. It looked like Domark was going to go for a move there, at least look for a move coming around the outside of turn 7 going into turn 8. Ooh, they're very close. There might have been some contact there coming through turn 7. We mentioned short track racing earlier. We were thinking there might have been an attempt at a bump and run there between Kyle Domark and Justin Barrera, but now Domark is looking to get the move done around the outside. Maybe he backs out of it. That's not really a corner you expect to see around the outside move on, and with Domark running that Ferrari with that high outside curb that caught out Admiral earlier on, I say he's driving the Ferrari, driving the Porsche, what am I saying? But still, that's a very hard curb there, very tall, and could definitely play havoc to your race with the weird way that these GT3 cars drive. I'm more of an open wheeler, so these GT3s have their own quirks and unique features that make them just beautiful to watch this awesome racing here.
Yeah, and certainly this has been an exciting start to the race. Attrell had made a move further down the field to get back up to 13th, and had previously had the fastest lap of the race at 1:57.62. That has since been taken by Domark, who I think is eager to get back into that top 5 fight. But Attrell, don't count him out of a potential top 10 finish. He has pace, but just needs to avoid a few of the errors. Over on his stream, from his perspective, he said at least he didn't put it in the fence this time. And indeed, while he did spin, he doesn't have any noticeable damage, so he still has a race to fight with about 37 minutes to go.
Those slightly damaged tires on that Ferrari of his aren't going to play as big of a role as they usually will in other series, because he will have to pit soon. These drivers are going to have to pit as well, maybe with damage, as they made contact the last lap, and it looked like they're nearly going to make contact again as they go through the stadium section here. This is incredibly close between these drivers, battling for the final position in the top 5. Right now, Barrera is not only clinging onto that last top 5 position, he is clinging onto his hopes of winning the championship this season. Ooh, that was very close there as they won on the brakes into turn 7. Domark goes down the inside. Ooh, that's definitely contact. Some nudging action there coming through turn 7, but Domark just doesn't get the move done yet, but I think these drivers are going to continue to battle. There is a lot riding on this fight. Domark wants to reclaim glory after the unfortunate race he had 2 weeks ago, and now Justin Dive Bomber Barrera, he is looking to try and dive bomb and just cut as much of that championship gap as he can and just try and stay in that championship fight. As I mentioned at the start of this broadcast, 45 points separates him and Gregory Hoferson at the top of this championship fight. So it's really a matter of life or death when it comes to the championship fight here for Justin Barrera. So he's going to have to drive his butt off to try and close that gap. But right now he has dropped back. You can see just the gap in space between these 2 cars battling and the drivers farther up ahead. So right now Barrera is not only at risk of losing the top 6, he is also at risk of losing a championship here.
Well, I think it's actually less about the championship than you'd think, Ron, because he would need to outscore Hoferson by 15 points, and that's a tall order, as he is still a very comfortable P1 at the moment. And even falling to P2 would be very easy going for Hoferson to secure the title. But Domark is his closest rival for P2 in the standings, and he wants to keep him behind and give him a monumental effort that he'd need to do next time at Watkins Glen to steal it from him. He's also benefited by Bellinger not being here today and will actually get outright P2 at the end of this race. But now looking to the inside, he had tried it last time. I think he'll get it this time. Domark staying side by side. He was on the inside. He moves now to the outside as they go through that chicane. Still on the inside. going down the hill. They are side by side. Barrera has it for the moment. The question will be whether Domark can get some good traction. Oh, they touch a little bit, and will they touch again? Domark does back off after the initial contact, but that is a weaker exit for Barrera. And we were talking about, will they get the elbows out? The elbows are all the way out there for Barrera. Domark may have to look to send it to the inside. He does just that. And also, as they fight, Grizzle will be licking his lips as he looks to get into the fight. And Alvis is also right there. They could benefit if these two continue to compromise themselves. But the fight may be over for the moment, as it is Domark taking the position. And now the BMW remains vulnerable. Grizzle may have just completed a move down the inside as we head to this left-handed turn through the little chicane, sticking it around the outside. A reverse dive bomb by Barrera. He holds on to P6.
Fantastic battling that we're seeing right now. It's just so characteristic of the racing action that we've seen so far this season. I expect that we'll see even more of that in 2 weeks' time at Watkins Glen. We're seeing some awesome battling here, but I think it's cooled off a little bit. You don't really see too many attempts at an overtake at the chicane, despite it being the heaviest braking zone on the track. It's such a tight chicane that you can't really go for a move there. It's such a shame because you'd expect heavy braking zone after the longest straightaway on the circuit. You'd expect to see some passes, but you'd be wrong with how tight that chicane is. But despite that, these drivers are still trying to find ways to get past each other, even if they have to break their elbows out. The prediction that we made of this being some short track-esque racing has definitely rung true so far. These drivers are getting physical. They're seeing the championship closing out. We're at race 5 of this 6-race season, so these drivers are seeing the year come to the end, and even though they might not be entirely involved in the championship fight, they're still trying to go out for all-out glory right now. And certainly that was what Domark does, and certainly I believe that's what Gristle will be doing here soon, as he might try and size up a fight here soon. But now we have Hovesen and Luther right now. They've been close all throughout this race, and the gap has closed once again. It's about 0.6 of a second separating these drivers. It's definitely not close enough for Luther to go for a nice move here on Hovesen, but I'm sure Hovesen is definitely feeling the pressure. Really, this is the closest anyone has been to him all season, or even in the pit stops even. Hovesen has just been in a league of his own, but right now he is getting challenged. And one of the reasons why the results could be so shuffled up, where we usually see Barrera battling for podiums, right now he's barely keeping it into the top 5. Meanwhile, Atril has had another dramatic race as he gets a position here done on Letska coming into the turn 8 hairpin. So Atril continuing to move up, but touching on the point that I mentioned earlier, the reason why the order with this field might be shuffled up just a little bit is probably down to how different this track is compared to everything else we've raced on. We've raced at tracks like Road America, Bathurst, we've raced at Road Atlanta, which is probably the twistiest track that we've raced on so far, but I think just with how tight, twisty, and stop-start this track is, that could be the reason why the field is shuffled up quite a lot. The man feeling the burn right now is definitely Barrera, who has now Gristle closing up to him slightly. You can see there's a little bit of a gap separating these drivers, but definitely not a comfortable gap for Barrera up ahead. We're riding on board with Gristle right now as they go down the start-finish straightaway. We are 8 laps into this race, 13, nearly 14 minutes in, and now Letska has had some kind of issue. He's towed back to the pits. Maybe got involved in some kind of incident. Well, you might have to take a look at a replay to see what might have happened there. So we now have 2 drivers. We'll get a replay now to see what happened with Letska. We now have 2 drivers out of this race, and Letska is one of them. We're looking at him now, I believe, coming into the Schumacher. No, he's going into the final chicane. My apologies. Going into the final chicane, has a spin, and I don't think he went into the barrier. I think he stopped it in the gravel trap, called it a night, and is probably halfway down on his first beer right now. You can't really blame the guy after a very tough night. He was running towards the back as an unfortunate incident exiting that final chicane, and he is now out of it.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate end for him. Wasn't doing too bad, but it now brings Atril a little bit closer to that top 10 fight. Although more fighting is here between Barrera and Grizzle. Barrera was really slow, and Grizzle taking advantage, going down the inside, entering the chicane. He will back out as Barrera zips along the outside. He has a very good line into that set of corners, and Grizzle, I think he probably just backed off a little too much there, because he's now fallen behind Alvis, who's made a solid move, but clearly they are still looking for a way behind Barrera, who hasn't been the fastest car tonight, but has done a good job of protecting and holding on to P6 at the moment. And you can tell that Dolmark has also been able to get a 3-second gap at the moment away from Barrera, so that's how much faster he has been. But still, a lot of excitement down here battling for P6. They're going through this other slow section. Grizzle also could be getting caught by Piran. But yeah, certainly will be interesting. However, we got more action. Rennsport battling Hall down to start-finish straight. Here comes Retzman. No, he thinks better of it. He was looking to the inside. But the BMW will hold on for the moment. Hall is currently 5th in the standings, but could get very close to overtaking Bellinger in terms for P4, even P3. And he's already had a very solid start to the race. But Rennsport is right there challenging him. And he is going to need to pull those elbows out and make some defense happen. Rennsport looking around the outside. No, he's got a slowdown, I think. That slowdown has come at a very crucial time for Rennsport. He moves up to P3, and as Hall will finally get back to racing speed, he now has to work his way back to P3.
If I'm not mistaken, we've just had 2 slowdowns in the span of about a lap. We saw Gristle slow down last lap. I believe that might have been down to a slowdown. He lost another position to Alvis. You can see him now, and we saw another slowdown there with Hall. He loses that position there to Rennsport, so the slowdowns definitely catching out a lot of these drivers. It's not the first 2 slowdowns that we've seen so far this race, and with so much left to play for, it will definitely not be the last. But the one thing these drivers have to keep in mind is the incident point limit. If you get 20 incident points here with this series, you do incur a penalty. So these drivers are going to have to be mindful of that. If they pick up the collision points, if they pick up the 4Xs with touching their rivals, or they pick up the 1Xs or 2Xs or however many Xs you pick up, it's going to hurt your race. These drivers just have to play it safe. I mean, we're not even that far into this race. We're only less than 10 laps in. We're 17 minutes in, 17 and a half minutes now into this race, and these drivers are just racing each other so aggressively. It goes back to the point that we mentioned right at the start of this broadcast, that these drivers were going to start taking more of each other, and I think that's definitely the case with this race. We've seen these drivers break out their elbows and start to break out the track limits as well, so we might see some penalties possibly rear their ugly heads towards the later stages of this race. We'll just have to wait and see how that develops.
Yeah, certainly, but one battle I'm also very interested in. Luther has been hanging with Hovesen this entire time, and while he hasn't been really in a position to make a move, while they've sped up, Luther has not dropped that far away. In fact, Luther was 0.04 of a second faster last time around. They've been matching times pretty closely. Last time, Hovesen a 1:56.8, Luther a 1:56.7. So they are very close, and while Hovesen does have the advantage, a good pit stop and pit strategy from Luther, I think would put him in a position to potentially overtake him for a lead. I don't think we'll have to worry about that for another 8 to 10 minutes time, but certainly that'll be a little bit of a interesting thing to watch as we continue. And going forward, while Hovesen's been strong, I don't think he's been as accustomed to seeing a car that close to him.
Now, one thing that we have seen a lot from Gregory Hovesen throughout the season is he usually turns on the hyperjets right before the pit stops near. We've seen this man set fastest lap after fastest lap right towards the pit window. You see him just, I mean, it hasn't even been a good fastest lap where he's probably about 10th quicker than his rivals. He's just crushed down and set an absolute greaser of a lap time, sometimes about a half second quicker than some of his rivals. So maybe Gregory Hovesen might turn on the jets when we get towards those pit stops in a few moments' time. Right now we're about 19 minutes in, so we, as you said there, Taylor, we might see the pit stops near in about 10 minutes, and it'll shuffle up this battle as well. That is start to heat up a little bit. You can see the gap between Barrera, Alvis, and Gristle has closed up quite a lot, and as those drivers have started to battle, you can see Perna has gotten involved in this fight as well. He's a little bit farther behind. I'm sure he's looking. He's the perfect camera car for this fight right now, as it looks like Alvis is closing in slowly but surely on Barrera coming into turn 1. He doesn't go for the move. Meanwhile, Gristle closes up along the braking zone. It is now a 4-car battle here. This is still very close. You can cover all 4 of these drivers with a blanket as they go through the first corners on this lap. So we might see the point of action that's flared up multiple times in this race, a turns 6 and 7 mini chicane, you could call it. It's not really a chicane, it's just back-to-back left and right-handers, but still the point of action that we've seen plenty of times throughout this very young race in the grand scheme of things. We've seen drivers go for moves and just battle coming through this section here. So we might see some action here. Gristle looked like he was going to try and pull the move off there on Alvis, and Alvis, I believe, got racy there with Justin Barrera. And meanwhile, as this goes on, you can see the gap there very close between Alvis and Gristle right behind, and as they continue to get very close to each other and kind of drag each other down, you can see Pern is closing up that gap as well. Now less than 0.4 of a second separating Pern and Gristle right now, so this 4-car battle is going to be one that we have to keep our eyes on before the pit stops.
The question will certainly be whether Barrera can hold on, because I think he is a slower car than each of the 3 behind him, but as they're having their own mini fights, they slow each other down, and it's going to, I think, come down to one big move where if Barrera has a mistake, he won't just find himself falling to 7th, he could find himself falling right down to 9th. There's a pretty safe gap between him and Cusano and Italiadis, but that wouldn't be great news for his P2 hopes, as Hall and Domark are in the top 5 at the moment, and I think they're trying to fancy something here. By the way, early pit stop. Grizzle is going to be going into the pits early, which that is an interesting move. I don't think it would be a penalty pit stop. Rather, I think he's going for a massive undercut. He sees that he's fast and he has a little bit of open track ahead of him. Maybe he's hoping that he can get a very solid few laps and overtake Barrera on the pit stop with that undercut. And I wonder if Alvis and Piran may follow suit.
Yeah, I was wondering, I went to check my iRacing live timing screen to see if he picked up some kind of penalty, because as our producer Jonathan mentioned, Gristle has been very slow coming through the chicane, and that's the tightest section of this circuit, so it's a section where you might expect some incident points to be occurred possibly, so maybe Gristle picked up a penalty, but from what we see, he's already exited the pit, so I don't think that was a penalty. I think it was just a regular pit stop. Ooh, these drivers might need a pit stop after they just made contact coming through turn 7. That was incredibly close there between Justin Barrera there and Alvis. That was definitely contact as they went in that corner. Barrera, dive bomber Barrera got dive bombed right there. That was a very strange incident between those drivers, but it's definitely heating up even more. Barrera went wide. You can see the tire grooves there in the gravel trap, and now they're going side by side through the Schumacher S. Alvis now has the inside. This is incredibly close, and now you can see that Pern has gotten involved in this fight. Those drivers were nearly going 3 wide exiting the Schumacher S there. They're continuing to go side by side, going through the next series of corners. Pern has the inside on Barrera. This is setting itself up to be a horrible lap for Barrera, but he holds on to that position for now. We could still see a move here in the not too distant future here for Pern. He definitely has a pace. I'm sure Justin Barrera is a little bit rattled. He definitely felt that contact that he had with Alvis coming through turn 7, so he might be a little bit rattled. Went very deep coming into the final chicane. Went extremely deep there. I'm shocked he managed to hold on to it. Is slowing down a lot. Maybe he just decided to yield that position, or maybe it was a slowdown. You never know. With how wide he went in that chicane, he definitely went off the track. He could have occurred a slowdown there. I think he's slowing a little bit more, so that's tough stuff there. Meanwhile, farther behind, we're seeing Simon Admiral continue to claw through this field as he's now trying to get past the only Mercedes in the field of Ed Lotus here, trying to break into that P10 spot. These drivers are very close right now. Admiral has clawed through the field. He's cut through it like a hot knife through butter. You can see the brakes glowing on that Ferrari as they went on the brakes going into turn 1. But right now, Admiral is definitely trying to size up his rival at this stage. Has plenty to play for here. I'm sure the order that you see on the left-hand side of your screen with these SDK graphics is definitely going to change here by the time these pit stops near. I'm sure the order that you see right now between the 13 cars still left on track will definitely be completely different. I'm sure Gristle will definitely have to make up some spots. I haven't taken a look at his lap times as of late, but I think Gristle is setting some not very good lap times at this stage. I'll check my live timing screen right now to see what kind of lap times he's settling right now.
Ron, I'm not sure whether Grizzle was on an out lap in his most recent one, but 2:26 could have spelt disaster. However, I think it's just he was right coming out of the pits, and that's where he's really slow for this lap. I think next lap we'll see whether this undercut has really gone horribly for him, and he will have to fight his way back to the top 10, or whether it's just a longer form strategy that'll really pay off by the time the others will pit. But certainly Barrera falling behind Alvis and Piran has thrown a wrench into the plans somewhat because Purin and Alvis aren't getting slowed up as much as they were in the previous laps.
Meanwhile, the point I mentioned not a long time ago, you could see Hovesen has now pulled away from Luther. Luther had a mistake there. You could see he set a 2:01 lap time, but Hovesen has kicked on the Hyper Jets, while Luther has kicked on the Hyper Jets and have sent him spinning around. He made some kind of mistake there on that last lap, was in the twos there, so not sure what happened there on that last lap, but Luther had a massive mistake. He went off track. And we might get a replay to see what happened here with Luther. Meanwhile, Cassano has had some kind of off. We're going to have to take a look at that soon. Meanwhile, we're looking at Luther here coming out of the hairpin at the far end of the circuit. He dipped the wheel into the gravel trap, and I think maybe picked up a slowdown from that. No, he hit the inside. He hit the outside curb going into the Schumacher S. That's a very strange incident there from Luther. Not really sure what in the world happened there. Maybe his screen blanked out. That was a very strange incident all around. Meanwhile, the possible incident with Cassano, that was just him coming into the pits. So now Grisel is not all alone on this very early pit stop strategy, but I think these pit stops are definitely going to near. We're approaching the 30-minute mark of this race, 26 and a half minutes now into this 45-minute affair here with the penultimate round of this season. So I think we might see the pit stops near here in the not-too-distant future, and the question is, what drivers are going to be pitting sooner rather than later? Are these drivers going to try and pull off the one-lap undercar, the lap one overcut? We'll just have to wait and see. These drivers have definitely tried to play with the strategy as of late. Meanwhile, farther behind, Adril has gone by Adalotus, so he's moved up into P9. So Adril continuing to cut through the field like a hot knife through butter while we pay attention here to this battle up towards the front with Retsma, Hall, and Domark right now. Retsma is starting to pull away a little bit, but I think Domark is trying to find a way to get past Hall. You can see they are close as they exit that final corner. This is definitely going to be a heated battle between these drivers. It's a yin and yang effect. The Porsche has its own strengths. The BMW has its own strengths as well. We've got a German manufacturer civil war right now at this German circuit, the only German track that we're racing on this season. So I think we might see some action here. Meanwhile, Pern has pulled into the pits from the top 10. So Pern is now trundling his way down pit road. So I think we did see it very early on with Grisel pulling in. Then we saw Cassano pull in. Now we're seeing Pern pull in. Probably in about 3, maybe 4 minutes time. I think in a couple laps, we'll start to see all these drivers flood down pit road.
Yeah, that'll certainly be something we need to keep our eye on as Domark and Hall continue their fight, and that'll be a question about when they want to pit. They'll probably just follow each other, but also it'll be when Hovesen, Luther, who's also further up the road, decide to bring it in. But this is now turning into a little bit of an exciting battle for P2, as Luther hasn't been able to find the form that he had while matching Hovesen. And by the way, keep an eye out, he had a 156.02. It was invalidated. I think he may have gone off track or something, picking up a warning, so it doesn't count as a fastest lap. But I have a feeling he'll be pitting sooner rather than later, as this pack stays just oh so close. Domark doesn't have room to make the move yet, but he is right on the tail of Hall, and it'll come down likely to pit stops to see what will happen in that fight.
I think the strategy is going to play a huge role in how this race turns out. I just took a quick look at my live timing screen, and I see that Grisel is setting in some very good lap times. He was the first driver to pull in. Right now is running in the P12 position farther towards the tail end of the field. But right now, Grisel has definitely kicked on the Hyper Jets. He has gotten those tires to work, and now he was possibly trying to eye up a pass here on Pascal here. Meanwhile, up towards the front, Luther and Hall have both pulled into the pits. You can see them trundling down pit road now. Thank you, Jonathan. And these drivers are definitely taking that gamble. They're seeing these drivers that have pitted, their tires are kicking on, and with the track so tight and twisty with so many corners to negotiate, 16 in total at this track, the tires are probably more important here than they were at Bathurst, which had even more corners than this. I think these drivers are seeing the importance of the tires at this stage in the race, so they're slowly closing in on those pit stops. Luther and Hall have pulled in. Now Adril is pulling into the pits. You can see him trundling down pit road now. So I think it's not going to be very long before these drivers start to flood down pit road. I think Hovesen, Retsma, Domark, Alvis, Barrera, they all have to be seeing these drivers pull in, and they have to be at least considering it. They need to know that, I mean, we've seen drivers try undercuts, we've seen drivers try overcuts. Some of them have been successful, others have not, but I think this track will probably be the one that favors the undercut more. So meanwhile, as these drivers continue to battle, the gap between Hovesen and Retsma right now is 9 seconds. You can see that he's spread out with other drivers pitting. So I think Hovesen has to consider a move down pit road here soon. Luther came in, so I think he's going to have to consider it at some point. We'll follow him towards the end of this lap, and we'll see if Hovesen decides to take possibly the championship-winning pit stop here. He is in a very good spot right now, with Barrera running farther down the field and not having a very good night of his own, and Bellinger not showing up tonight. Hovesen is in a very good position. He is not pulling in yet, so Hovesen is stretching another lap, so we might have to see maybe some drivers farther behind try the undercut. Dolmark right now is only 0.7 of a second behind Retsma. Maybe he might try and risk it. And the point I mentioned earlier of Hovesen kicking on the afterburner towards right before he pits, you can see just at the fastest lap of the race at 55.1. Meanwhile, Retsma and Dolmark have come into the pits, so they decide to take that gamble. Meanwhile, Hovesen is continuing to set fastest lap after fastest lap. Point I mentioned there of him kicking on the hyperjets right before the pit stops, you just saw it right there as he set the fastest lap. Everyone is coming into the pits right now. These drivers are realizing how important new tires are at a track like this, and I think it will be not too long until we see Hovesen come in too.
Hovesen's a pretty comfortable lead, so that's the reason he's feeling that he can stay out. I mean, a 155.1 is leading to another absolutely blistering in-lap. Potentially, this could be his in-lap, but meanwhile, he's got a pretty comfortable lead to the point where he'll exit the pits pretty safely in first. Retsma and Dolmark exiting the pits. They're going to still be close to each other in a fight. And I believe Dolmark may have actually gotten by Hall in terms of the overcut pit strategy. But either way, they are going to be very close. And let's see if Hovesen does, as he begins his time into the final sector, dive into the pits. As they're side by side with a little bit of blinking, that I think gave the window for Dolmark to jump through. And now he's got a long way to go. That gap will, of course, be cut down very high margin when Hovesen does pit. But that's a crucial move to get him into P2 and back into the fight. He has long been the driver who's been the closest to the level of Hovesen throughout the season. And if he has a magical second stint, he's got 13 minutes to make the fight for the lead interesting, or to make the margin between him and Barrera a lot shorter, leading into Watkins Glen in 2 weeks' time. Hovesen now will enter the pits, and we'll have to see how this pit stop goes. The fastest one of the race, tied between Alves and Piran, who had 11.83, although Alves was a couple tenths faster in the pit lane as a whole. You need to be careful. You don't want to speed, and here Hovesen is. Pole position, very front pit box, right by the edge of pit road. We can see the other drivers on the mini-map getting ready to round that final turn. 11.87, 33.98, second shortest amount of time in pit lane, and the tied third shortest pit stop. More than enough margin for Hovesen to hold on. Cold tires may hurt him ever so slightly, but now we are about ready to go for that final stint. And Ron, it's the one where we see the most action. No more pit stops. You're purely fighting for position.
It's a final sprint of the race, really. I'm sure Hovesen right now is feeling very confident about the position he's in. And I gotta wonder, that gap between him, Dolmark, and Retsma right now, I gotta wonder if the battle that we saw last lap with Dolmark and Retsma as they exited the pits, I gotta wonder if that's a reason why Hovesen had a very commanding lead. Sure, if they didn't battle, it'd probably still be about 10 seconds separating Hovesen compared to the rest of the field, but I think that slowed them down a little bit, so it's a good thing that they didn't battle too hard. Otherwise, I think they'd be at risk of being even farther back, probably 15 seconds behind Hovesen, but Hovesen pulled that off beautifully. This man seems close to untouchable in this series. Even right before a pit stop, he was setting just greasers of laps. He was setting a 1:55.1, which I believe was actually faster than his qualifying lap. So it shows you that this man driving that Porsche for Delta Sport has just been on rails this season. So right now, about 12.1 seconds. He is in a very good position right now to not only take his 5th win of the season, but also grab the Season 2 championship. For the sake of some action, maybe we just commentators cursed him, fingers crossed. I can't really say fingers crossed that we commentators jinxed him, because that would be mean, but that would definitely be action-packed if Hovis and Rance is some kind of issue, because I'm sure Domark and Retsma, they're very thirsty to grab these podium positions. I'm sure they'd be even thirstier to try and grab a win.
Indeed, and by the way, someone who won't be fighting for a win, Jake Luther. It's heartbreaking, as he had been very good throughout the race, but a couple different issues have hampered him and now leave him out of the fight. I think we're going to take a look at the replay of what happened to Luther. A recent battle against Italiadis, looking to the inside. They are side by side, and he just gets turned. That may have been netcode, and oh no. That is heartbreaking for Luther. That is, wow. I think we may try to get another view eventually as the fight continues between Purin and Alvis. They're still in the fight. And now let's take a look now from the chopper. Italiadis going a little bit slow, and Luther licking his lips, trying to make the move. There he went to the inside. And yeah, Italiadis, just a skill issue there. He went too far back into him. And that is unfortunate for Luther.
Yeah, that's such a shame, because both of them have been really putting together some good races, and sadly for Luther, a little bit of, possibly a little bit of netcode, and that's something that we've seen so far this season, whether it's been me officiating races here in iRacing or calling iRaces here on Apex Racing TV. Netcode has popped up many times in incidents so far this season, so maybe that will be something that iRacing looks at here in the not-too-distant future. If you want to hear other people's more informed opinions about the world of iRacing, check out the late Apex here on Apex Racing TV. That'll be on Friday nights at 6 p.m. Eastern, I believe 3 p.m. Pacific. So if you want to tune in, hear Sam Fitzpatrick and the gang here at Apex Racing TV talk about the world of sim racing, you know where to find it. And Apex Racing has a whole bunch of stuff going on here. We've got the Radical Racing Challenge on Fridays as well. I know that series has always been a blast, and we'll be racing at Jerez, I believe, this upcoming Friday. So if you'd like to tune in for some Radical action of the official Radical series here on iRacing, you know where to find us. We have a lot of racing action here on Apex Racing TV, and the S1 Racing GT3 Sprint Series is definitely one of them, as we're seeing this fight here between Alvis taking a very unusual line coming down the back straightaway to try and break that slipstream effect between him and Pern, who is at risk of losing a position here to Barrera in P7. You can see these drivers are very close. Oh, there might have been some... Not sure what happened there. Pern, it looked like he just went straight on mid-corner. Maybe there was some contact. It might have been some contact, as they're now going side by side, coming down the start-finish straightaway. It looked like, now it looks like Pern is going to try and get the move done once again, coming into turn 1. Barrera runs a little wide and leaves that door open for Pern to get the move done. He's now going to be on the outside coming through turn 2, but he just isn't close enough to get that move done on Barrera. We might have to take a look at a replay once this battle is done, as these drivers are continuing to battle. It looked like Pern was going to try and sneak a wheel down the inside of turn 4 there. We might see this heat up even more in the not-too-distant future, but I think once this battle cools off, we might have to take a look to see what happened between Barrera and Pern. It looked like Pern just went straight, coming through the final corner. I'm not sure what happened there. There might have been some contact. Maybe it just went sideways for some reason. We're seeing the chopper view right now of that battle there, going into turn 1, I believe, unless my screen is glitched and I'm looking at the wrong thing. Yeah, we're looking at the overhead battle here of the battle as they went through the first series of corners, and Barrera holds on to that position for now. I think this battle will continue to heat up, but that was strange there to the incident that led to Pern losing that position. It just looked like his car went straight mid-corner, so maybe there's a little bit of contact, maybe a bump and run. We compared it to short track racing multiple times throughout this broadcast, but it seems like that comparison rings true with every passing incident. These drivers breaking their elbows out, racing each other really hard, and I mean, you can't really blame them, but towards the end of the season, I think these drivers have a lot less to lose and a lot more to gain here. So right now we're seeing while the battle between Pern and Barrera was a one to watch earlier on a few moments ago, now the battle is going to be between Alvis and Barrera. You can see they're very close. We're going to get a view here to see as they go through turn 10. Alvis leaves that inside open, trying to focus on the exit. He does a late apex coming out of the final corner to try and focus on that run coming down and, well, coming onto the start-finish straightaway. So Alvis holds onto that position for now, but I don't think that fight is going to be over here soon. Meanwhile, farther behind, we've got some shuffling there. Ooh, Barrera looks down the inside. That was close there. It looked like those drivers were nearly going to make contact. Any sort of mistake between one of these drivers can result in a 4-car accident very quickly with how close they are. You can see on the left-hand side of your screen, these drivers are separated by no more than about 2.5 tenths of a second. So it's incredibly close between these drivers right now. And meanwhile, farther behind, I believe it was Cassano and Adriel that were battling. Saw some shuffling at the back, a shot as they went down the start-finish straightaway. But this is a battle that we have to keep our eyes on. 4 cars covered by blankets. What do you think, Taylor? There's some awesome stuff here, ain't it?
Yeah, all of us got into the fight because it looked like they had a slowdown or potentially just an error earlier. But yeah, it is turning into an absolutely beautiful fight for P5 as we continue here with about 5 minutes to go. Actually, about 4, but you'll have a little bit of time on that white flag final lap. But certainly expect the drivers to bring out the elbows even more. All these drivers within about a second of each other, set for a potential thrilling finish here. Maybe looking to the inside, no, there wasn't any room. But as Barrera looks to get by Alvis, and Alvis cutting away to the inside again, trying to break that line of tow. Barrera follows, and so do the other Ferraris in this mix.
This is a beautiful battle that we've got here. We've got 2 Ferraris, we've got BMW, and we've got a Porsche BMW sandwich. Contact, more contact made coming through the chicane. It ends in disaster for 3 of these drivers. It all started with Barrera making contact with the Porsche ahead of him, of Alvis, and that ended in absolute heartbreak there for Pern, who makes contact with that outside wall. We'll definitely have to take a look at multiple replays because that was a lot of things happening there at once. There was basically a sandwich there. It was 8 wheels at once. We're taking a look at a replay to see this unfortunate incident here. It all starts with Barrera making contact with Alvis entering that final chicane. It just outbroke himself quite a lot, looking for a dive bomb, make more contact, and then sadly for him, he just spins back onto circuit and makes contact with Pern and Barrera. Oh, you gotta feel bad for all those drivers. It's not really... I mean, it's just very hard racing that results in that kind of incident. Really no foul play involved, but it's just such a shame to have a battle like that towards the end of the race. And there's more contact made with this battle as a Ferrari there of Cassano spins off. Cassano got involved in this battle after that fight going on there. And while all of this is going on, Attrell has managed to claw up the field. He is currently running in P8. Right behind this man, Pern, who I believe has he has to have some kind of damage. After that, maybe some diffuser damage, rear wing damage. I can't see any on my screen, but I'm sure there has to be some to that Ferrari. These cars are so aerodynamically sensitive. So we're getting another replay here to see this chaotic series of events here towards the end of this race. We're looking at Cassano here battling, I believe, with Pern going into turn 1. You can see Attrell there as well. This is where everything started off. Cassano gets a move done. Well, he looks for the move done. Coming into turn 1, they still go side by side. Coming out of turn 2, it looked like they were making even more contact as they went through turn 2. So these drivers are racing incredibly hard. They're breaking the elbows out. Cassano looks for the move again going into turn 3, but it's not close enough. Then he tries to go for the switchback here in 4. I think he drifted out a little bit, made contact with the rear, and just, oh, it's so unfortunate. It's an unfortunate incident to end Cassano's chances. Didn't make contact with the wall, but he is definitely, the only damage I feel to him is his hopes and dreams of having a good result here tonight.
Yeah, certainly more emotional damage for Cassano. It'll still probably give him a top 10 if he can hold on. But meanwhile, the question will be whether Grizzle can make a move past Alvis. Alvis may have some rear wing damage, well, rear of the car damage as well, not just on the wing, but on that bumper from the incident earlier with Barrera. And he is getting challenges. Attrell is making the move on Pier, and they're going back and forth and side by side. The white flag is probably going to come out this time around for Hovesen, and these drivers are going to be running out of opportunities to take the positions. Here comes Attrell going down the inside, and oh, he's absolutely sent Pirin, but good sportsmanship. He's letting him get back up to racing speed. Although, is he making back up to racing speed? No, he can't. That wreck is probably done day for Piran, which is unfortunate. He had fought through a lot of chaos. He had taken a lot of damage on his door on the previous incident from Barrera, and now Atril, who I think was getting a little bit, maybe just a touch too aggressive, has unfortunately sent Piran spinning out, but as the league commissioner, he'll be sure to give himself a warning for that incident. Someone who doesn't need a warning, but instead will take the crown. Hovesen, 5th win and the championship safely secured, as this indeed is a checkered flag. And what do you know, 154, fastest lap to close the chapter on the championship fight. Wow, I mean, that is just expected. And Domark will take the fight to Barrera at Watkins Glen, a huge second place finish for him. Retsma follows it up with a podium finish, a great effort from him to go in 3rd. Hall safely in 4th, and thanks to a couple of those incidents, no close finishes as the top 5 will be ready to cross the line. Hall in P4, Alvis, maybe there's a little bit of a chance for Grizzle, but I don't think there's going to be enough time going through this final corner. Good stuff from Alvis to keep fighting, and Grizzle, who's had a pretty active race, will take a very strong feeling P6, and Barrera further down the road should be P7 without any more skill issues.
Well, I think now with the drivers crossing the line, it's official. Barrera has crossed the line in a fairly disappointing P7, and really he couldn't fight throughout all the season. Really, no one could. Gregory Hovesen closes off the season in dominant fashion, wins by 14.7 seconds at the end of it. You can see some donuts there. Might be some donuts for our champion there, trying to burn the rubber down. I think I see a Porsche rear wing peeking out of the smoke there. Yeah, you can see beautiful donuts there in the runoff of turn 1 for your champion this year. He closes off the season in spectacular fashion, doing some donuts, doing some, I'm not sure what kind of shape that is. I'm not sure what letter that is there, as he goes burning some rubber in a small little strip there between turns 1 and 2. Gregory Hovesen just dominant from start to finish. He's now taken 5 wins out of 5 so far this season. He'll look to close the season off with another win and take the clean sweep in 2 weeks' time at Watkins Glen. Gregory Hovesen now wins by 14.7 seconds, grabs the fastest lap by a country mile, and takes the championship here for the S1 Racing GT3 Sprint Series here for Season 2. And then Kyle Domark takes a very good P2. He recovers nicely from the difficulties he ran into 2 weeks ago. He finishes in 2nd place, and Spencer Retsma completes your podium there in a very dramatic battle towards the late stages of that race. Justin Hall finishes in P4. Bradley Alvis finishes in P5, involved in that accident as well. And then we have Gristle in P6, Justin Barrera in P7, Simon Attrell, it was just had a very dramatic race, had an incident at the start, gets involved in another incident towards the end, but he finishes in the top 10, gets a P8 run out of tonight's race. And we have Christopher Casano in P9, Atalotis in P number 10. He had a very quiet race, all things considered. We didn't see too much of him. He rounds off your top 10 in the only Mercedes in the field. Now we have Jed Pascal, who had a very quiet race as well. He ends the race in P11. Then Matthew Pern, who did not have a very quiet race, was involved in fights all throughout the show here this evening. He finishes in P12. Jake Luther finishes in P13 after a crash there with Atalotis not too long ago. Letsky finishes in P14, got involved in an accident early on. Well, it wasn't an accident, he just spun and decided to have a beer for the rest of the night. And then Jesse Olsen rounds out your field, who did not take the start. He had a computer issue, according to himself in the YouTube chat here of the stream here on Apex Racing TV. That was action-packed from start to finish. I'm going to need a moment to catch my breath.
Yeah, I mean, that was an absolutely crazy one. I mean, it feels like the racing has gotten even more crazy as the season has gone on, and that's to be expected. They've gotten more comfortable driving with each other, and that's where they start to roll the dice a little bit more. But notably, there were a few pretty big incidents today. I think a big story, apart from Hovesen, going 5 for 5, securing the title, is Domark fighting to P2, a very solid effort, and now all eyes will be on him and Barrera for who can get the silver crown at the Watkins Glen. Because of Barrera's incident, he was further down the order, but benefited thanks to the late incident between Piran and Attrell. Simon on his stream, he mentioned that he needs to apologize to Piran. But yeah, just unfortunate that Pierre's battered and bruised car could not survive that final hit. But certainly an exciting time this time around, and in 2 weeks, it'll come to a close at the end of what has been a fantastic season.
I couldn't agree with you more there, Taylor. It's been a fantastic season, even though we've had really a runaway champion from start to finish. Definitely a deserving champion in Gregory Hoveson, but as you mentioned there's still so much to play for in that one last race of the season. If you want to watch that here in 2 weeks' time here on Apex Racing TV, the race at Watkins Glen, which, Taylor, you've said you've always been looking forward to it ever since we started this season off many weeks ago at Sebring. That will be a race that I'm looking forward to as well, because there's definitely a lot of drivers with some hard feelings and definitely a lot to prove in the final race of the year. And if any of you would like to watch that, you know where to find us here on Apex Racing TV on Wednesday, November the 22nd, to round this season off at 9:10 Eastern Time, 6:10 Pacific. So if you want to watch this race, if you want to watch this series, the final race of the year in 2 weeks' time, you know where to find us. And as I mentioned many moments ago, Apex has all kinds of stuff going on as well. We've also got the ARL Prototype Championship. They'll have their 8th round of the season at Road America on Friday, November the 8th at 2:30 p.m. EST, 6:30 p.m. UCT, even though there's probably not many British people watching this stream so late in the evening here on the East Coast of the U.S. And it's also at 11:30 a.m. Pacific. That'll be some great prototype action as well. There's a lot to fight in that championship. There's a lot to fight in this championship as well. And I'm sure in 2 weeks' time, Watkins Glen is going to be no different. I'll ask you this one quick little question here, Taylor, before we wrap things up. What are you looking forward to the most to follow at Watkins Glen?
Well, probably everything, because there's just going to be, I think, so much on the plate. It's going to be a can't-miss race. And it's kind of funny to say. I mean, the championship's been decided. What else is there to see? Well, it's pretty much every other position on the standings, and hopefully everyone can show up that time around. We had a couple notable dropouts in the top 10 of the standings, but yeah, should be an exciting time. And even if it is a small field for Watkins Glen, there were only 15 drivers, a season low. Didn't matter. Still, what an exciting showing, and I think it's just going to be really fun just to see them up in New York, see them at the fun track. A little bit wider, a little more room to work, but also with some tougher technical bits that are always going to be hard to manage. So should be a great way to wrap up the season.
Well, we had a small field tonight, but we had a big amount of action. I'm sure the viewers at home enjoyed it just as much as myself, Taylor, and Jonathan enjoyed it producing this race. So there's just so much to play for in 1 week's time. You mentioned everything. That's my favorite kind of bagel. So we've got everything to play for in 2 weeks' time at Watkins Glen, and I hope you, the viewer, can join us there in 1 week's time. Our thanks go out to Dr. Dabber and Zine, who have been the proud partners of the S1 Racing Series and make these broadcasts possible. I thank Jonathan Grabowski, who I finally got the name right. I redeemed myself after the start of the broadcast. I thank him for replacing our usual partner in crime here, Joshua Wilkie, who took a week off here. He brought on this fantastic race here, worked all the cameras in the virtual production hauler. We thank him for helping us out as well. I thank you, Taylor, for joining me in the commentary booth, and usually I would well, I can't really thank myself because that would be a real scummy thing of me to do. So I'll round this broadcast off by congratulating our Season 2 champion, Gregory Hoveson. Thank you all so very much for watching, and we hope to see you in 2 weeks' time for the Watkins Glen race. Thank you all for watching, and have a great rest of your night.